This process begins with the mayor's budget guidance and the release of the initial general fund forecast. Bureaus then develop and submit their requested budgets. The city budget office reviews these requests and issues recommendations to the council. The mayor develops and releases his proposed budget, typically at the beginning of May. Council then considers and approves the budget later in May, and the budget is finally adopted by the council in June. This process is long because we want budget development to be thoughtful, accurate, and informed. However, this year with the COVID-19 crisis, we've had to adjust rapidly to a new and emerging financial reality. So way back last September, when we started the budget process for the upcoming fiscal year, we were optimistic about the year to come. The mayor released his no-cut budget guidance for the first time in years. So I think the last time we had no cuts, no general fund cuts in the budget was back in fiscal year 15-16, 5 years ago. The mayor's guidance also allowed bureaus to request new general fund resources and directed bureaus to collaborate on a number of key priority areas, as listed on this slide. Our general fund forecast, as of February, just a few short months ago, included a total of $28.5 million in anticipated new general fund discretionary resources. Good financial practice dictates that we balance our forecast over 5 years, which leads to the division of our resource into two types. Resources that we anticipate to be available for all 5 years of the forecast we designate as ongoing resource, and those we can use to support ongoing costs like people and ongoing programs. You can see that our forecast in February included $4.5 million of these ongoing resources. Resources that we anticipate to be available next year, but not for the duration of the 5-year forecast, we designate as one-time, and we recommend that those be only spent on one-time things, like major maintenance expenses or one-time projects. Again, a few short months ago, we anticipated $24 million in new or excess one-time resources. Then the COVID-19 crisis happened, and our financial picture changed suddenly and dramatically. The financial picture is still very much evolving, but we had to balance the budget to a new reality. As a result, our city economist, Josh Harwood, provided the council with an updated forecast on April 21st. Again, there remains substantial uncertainty in our financial future, which Josh will speak to. I'm going to turn it over to him now so he can share with you the picture that we've shared with the mayor and council to help them adjust to this new and changing reality. Josh, take it away.
All right. Again, it's Josh Harwood. I'm the city economist here for Portland. Jessica and Eileen summarized the situation pretty well, I think. We're kind of in the middle of the storm. And so it's really hard to see sort of the horizon. And so until we get there, it's going to be a lot more difficult. And the reality is that, local economist Bill Connerly said, if you can tell me when the health crisis ends, I can tell you a lot more about the economics. And so we're just starting to get plans from the governor's office about opening up. It's not certain that people will actually go out though. So because of that, we know that traffic through the airport is down from 94% from a year ago. We can be certain about a small number of revenue impacts. I mean, we know that lodging taxes, relatedly, are way off, and that there's roughly 20 hotels that are closed in Portland right now. So we don't even have rooms available necessarily, even if people were willing to travel, which they're not right now. But we're less certain about a lot of other taxes, like property taxes. I would expect that delinquencies for property taxes would go up a little bit, but the reality is that we just don't know anything. And then the extension of the tax deadline to July 15th creates even greater uncertainty, because usually for us, our business income taxes in the city, we collect about 60% of the taxes after April 15th. And so by moving it to July 15th, we're expecting, there's going to be a little change of the data sources. So Jessica, you can move on to the next one. So, but we do know some economic activity, and we do know that what I think we're having a little bit of trouble with is just the sense of scale. We've had initial claims in Oregon shot up right at the end of March. They've stayed relatively high, and so I think the reality though is that it's different than what we've seen before, but it's different in a lot of ways. And one of the ways it's different is that there's a lot of furloughed workers in there. And so So we want to be careful about overstating sort of the extremity of the situation. But the reality is that we've not seen anything like this before. Go ahead, you can move forward. So this is was put out by the Oregon Office of Economic Analysis. It's the latest best thinking of the Governor's Council of Economic Advisors, and probably reflects what I think we'll see in a couple of different revenue sources, in particular our transportation revenue sources. We'll see an initial bounce back, but the unemployment rate is not going to come down right away to the level it was beforehand. So we're gonna see a longer, slower growth path. So mostly general fund revenues this current year, we should be okay, because most of it is being collected on economic activity that happened before the COVID-19 crisis, and so the reality is that we should be okay this year. We do know that the immediate exceptions are Parks and Peabody. Peabody's losing gas taxes every day, and parking every day downtown. So we know that that's going to be a problem. Parks shut down all of their community centers, so they're not getting fees for swimming pools and courts and all of those things. So they're likely to be slow to come back, because I think the phased-in nature of the economic reopening is going to be, and the governor has sort of come out and started talking like this too, is that it's going to be slow to come back, at least all the way. I think we'll get a little bit of a bounce, and then it'll just be a slow trickle as people get more comfortable going outside. This is all predicated on the idea that eventually we have some kind of medical innovation that allows us to track this a little bit better than we have so far. So ultimately what we did, the general fund discretionary resources total about $600 million. We cut that by about $75 million, mostly in our business income taxes. So that's on a base, that 45 million is on a base of 160 million, largely. We cut transient lodging taxes in half, because it's just going to be hard to make up for the closures that have happened. And then property taxes and utility license taxes and franchise fees will likely see increased delinquency rates, but the timing and magnitude of those are difficult to figure out exactly right now. So we'll have to see that as we progress into the fall. Ultimately, we decreased the general fund revenue, discretionary revenue, by $75 million in fiscal year 2021. Then just 2 months ago, it's about a 13% decrease overall. So important points that are not included in the forecast. So this is just the forecast that our office does around discretionary general funds forecast. So there's no federal stimulus money in there yet, and we're still working through the regulations about how flexible those funds will be for us. And it also doesn't talk about non-general fund impacts. So like I said, so transportation, the utilities, our water and sewer departments, our development services folks. So those all have unique components to this, and unique we'll have unique paths out of it as well. So I think now I'm handing it back over to Jessica. Do I have one more? I've got one more, I guess. But the risks right now are pretty obvious, I think. It's a human behavior one that is going to be the hard one to really gauge exactly what's going to happen. China reopened everything pretty easily, but people didn't go outside. So, we can give everybody as many stimulus checks as we want, but until they're comfortable actually attending a restaurant, we're not going to see us get back to where we were. And in Portland, Portland is a little bit more resilient than most in terms of our revenue streams, and largely that's because the property tax system here, while a little convoluted, is very stable, and so and that's about 40% of our revenue, or 45% of our revenue. So that helps us a lot in terms of being resilient. It's a little different picture than you might get from the state, and their forecast, I think, is May 20th. So things are moving quickly for all governments. We've likely been increasingly a tourism hub though, and so that could be a little bit difficult to see come back really quickly. So now I'm going back to Jessica, right?
Sorry, I guess I was muted there. So this is our last slide, and then we'll turn it back over to Eileen for questions. In addition to our annual budget development process, we also have at the city certain times where we open the budget up during the year to make adjustments. These are called our supplemental budget processes. We also refer to these processes as budget monitoring processes because we conduct monitoring during those times. This leads to the shorthand term BUMP, BMP. If you hear somebody mentions the BUMP, this is what they're referring to. We conduct the fall supplemental budget or BUMP in October and the spring supplemental budget in May. These processes are right at this moment providing critical points of flexibility for us as we adjust to the uncertain and evolving financial picture. So even though we must adopt an annual budget right now, we fully expect to know more about our financial situation in the fall, and we will use the fall BUMP process to adjust as needed to the updated information when we have it. So now I will turn it back over to Eileen.
All right. Thank you, Jessica and Josh. So now we will open it up for questions, and journalists who are joining us, please choose the Zoom option of raising your hands, and I'll call you one by one. And also please indicate if your question is for Jessica or for Josh or for both. So let me know if you have a question to ask either of our panelists. Okay, if you don't have any questions, I know this is a very technical budget and you likely might need a couple more minutes or some time to review it, so that if you do have questions later, just feel free to contact me. You all know my contact information with the mayor's office. So right now I'm just scrolling through Zoom to see if there are any hands raised, and I don't see any right now. All right, Jessica, Josh, do you have anything else to add?
I don't think so. I think in addition to Eileen's contact information, you can ask her for our contact information as well. We're always happy to provide additional information and clarity to the extent that we can, particularly during this uncertain time. So feel free to reach out if you'd like any more background on any of this technical information.
Awesome. Okay. Well, if you have no more questions, I want to thank everyone for joining us and have a great afternoon. Bye.
That is a warrant.
No, it's not. It's a Department of Homeland Security order.
It's a warrant.
Okay. No, it's not a warrant. It's not a warrant under the Constitution of the United States.
Warrant of arrest of alien.
Yeah, warrant of arrest of alien not signed by a judge. It's not a judicial warrant. I have no obligation to oblige by that warrant.
This is a lawful warrant
Signed by a judge?
Of the Immigration and Nationality Act, and an official designated with that authority.
Are you hearing this, Mark?
Yeah, I'm telling him I'm on my way.
Our attorney's on his way.
Okay. What's that gonna?
That's not a warrant.
That is a warrant.
No, it's not. It's a Department of Homeland Security order.
It's a warrant.
Okay. No, it's not a warrant. It's not a warrant under the Constitution of the United States.
It's a warrant under the Immigration and Nationality Act of the United States.
Okay, that's fine, but it's not under the Constitution. You have no jurisdiction over me as a citizen. I'm the driver of this vehicle.
Okay, are you familiar with Title 8, Section 1324 of U.S. Code?
Somewhat.
Somewhat. In what regard?
I'm studying to be a Department of Justice accredited representative, so I've been through trainings.
Okay.
And I have copies of actually in this box right here, I have a copy of a real warrant and a copy of that, just so people know not to listen to that.
Okay, so you're aware of the statutes governing transporting and harboring illegal aliens in the United States?
I am.
Okay.
into a situation of exploitation where that migrant is then charged, held against their will, their families are exploited back home to pay more money to pay off their smuggling debt.
So let's go back to the process. Border Patrol apprehends, processes, turns over to ICE. ICE then, again, when I was, for example, in El Paso, turns them over to an organization like the Annunciate House, who also helps allocate them to other churches to further care for individuals, but try and identify family members or relatives or some place where they can be sent to. People buy plane tickets, buy bus tickets, and these individuals are sent all over the country. Is that basically what's happening? Again, as rapidly as possible. That's occurring within 6, 7, 8, 9 days in general.
Yes, sir, that's occurring very quickly. In March, we begin releasing non-criminal process families because we were at 19,000. So we begin releasing them, working closely with our NGO partners to provide service for them after release.
Now, when you say you began releasing, Border Patrol began releasing them right, bypassing the step with ICE right into non-government organizations.
That's correct, sir. Our capacity level's at 19,000 and climbing. For the safety of our officers, our agents, and for those that we detain, we begin releasing.
So my final point is, in part of that processing, I think the migrants give you an address where they think they're going to go, correct?
Yes, sir.
But once you turn them over to a non-government organization, you have no idea where they really go.
That's correct. They're provided with a change of address form in case they go someplace else, but where they ultimately go after we release them or on an order of recognizance, we don't control where they go or how they get there.
And yet, again, the assumption is they're going to meet up with some relative. A lot of people have come in during the Central American Wars from the 80s. So there are a lot of people they know, and they've got social media, but yet we still are finding families in stash houses.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know two of our members, Senator Hassan and Rosen, have a markup, so I would defer my questioning and defer to Senator Hassan.
Thank you very much, Senator Peters, for the courtesy. Thank you to Chairman Johnson and Ranking Member Peters for this hearing. Thank you to all of our witnesses for being here to testify, as well as for your service to our country. And please thank all the men and women you work with on our behalf as well. We all want to make sure that those of you on the front lines have the resources you need We also want to make sure that you are doing your jobs consistent with American values, and I think that's something we all share. Mr. Howe, I wanted to start with a question to you. It would be great if we could have a brief update on drug seizures at our land ports of entry along the U.S.-Mexico border. Have we seen an increase in trafficking of any particular narcotic over the past 6 months?
Thank you, Senator, for the question, and thank you for visiting McAllen in May. Our narcotic seizures are on track for to match our numbers from last year. Year to date, we've seized more than 39,000 pounds of methamphetamine, which is tracking a little bit higher than normal. 38,000 pounds of cocaine, 3,200 pounds of heroin, and nearly 2,000 pounds of fentanyl.
And thank you. In particular, have fentanyl seizures increased or decreased over the past 6 months? And what does that tell you about the drug cartel's plans for the trade of fentanyl?
I think we're seeing less through our mail facilities, and it's trending up slightly on the southern border with the fentanyl.
Right. And of course, while the size of the seizures of fentanyl that you just recounted sounds smaller than the other drugs, 2,000 pounds of fentanyl is an awful lot of fentanyl, given its lethality.
Absolutely.
Mr. Hastings, how do Border Patrol's drug seizure numbers compare with CBP's seizures at ports of entry?
Thank you for the question. So we have noticed the hard narcotics generally trending up, and by what I mean specifically, cocaine seizures are up, methamphetamine seizures are up, and heroin seizures are up. Cocaine, about 97,000 pounds cocaine seized so far this fiscal year between the ports of entry. About 9,800 pounds of methamphetamine seized between the ports of entry. Heroin, 448 pounds of heroin seized so far between the ports of entry. Marijuana is slightly down at about 200,000 pounds. And fentanyl, although down a little bit at 149 pounds, still obviously very highly concerning.
Well, thank you for the information. Mr. Hastings, I want to turn to another topic. I understand very clearly from my visits to the border, the one I just did with Senators Johnson and Peter and the one I did last year, that we are facing a humanitarian and security crisis along the southwestern border. And I agree with you that we need comprehensive immigration reform in order to help relieve some of the flow of migrants into the United States. However, there is absolutely no excuse for the reported conditions at Border Patrol facilities that house child migrants. Outside lawyers recently visited a Border Patrol facility in Clint, Texas, where they reported widespread instances of children living in squalor, being denied the ability to shower for weeks at a time, caring for infants just a few years younger than themselves, and being locked in cages for the vast majority of the day. Similar reports of gross mismanagement and horrible conditions have come to light at the Border Patrol facilities at McAllen and El Paso, as well as a private facility in Homestead, Florida. I truly understand how overwhelmed Border Patrol is. I think you've done a very good job of highlighting it in your testimony. I certainly saw a great deal of it when I was down at the border just last month. I also understand that CBP needs funding to address this crisis. Hopefully, we will be able to take action here in the Senate on an emergency aid package in the coming days. However, when dealing with children, your first and foremost priority is to ensure that the children in the federal government's custody are treated with the same kind of care, dignity, and support that we would want and expect for any child. To that end, Mr. Hastings, I would like a very clear answer on these questions. First, does CBP have an obligation to provide toothpaste and soap to children in your custody? Yes or no?
We're providing that in El Paso, in Clint Station.
The news reports say otherwise, but